Michael Jackson saw a bald little girl crying alone in the hospital hallway. He sat her down next to her. What he whispered changed her life forever. She was 7 years old. Bald alone, sitting on a cold hospital floor in the middle of a hallway, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. And Michael Jackson, the most famous man on the planet, was walking straight toward her. He had no cameras with him, no publicist, no security team pushing people out of the way, just him. In a black jacket, walking slowly down a children's hospital corridor, hands in his pockets, head slightly down, like someone who had done this many times before and never once thought it was extraordinary. And when he saw her, he stopped, not for a second, not for a photo. He stopped completely, like the rest of the world had disappeared. But wait, this wasn't supposed to happen. Nobody even knew he was there. Let me tell you the whole story. August 1996, Los Angeles, California. Michael Jackson was in the middle of one of the biggest tours of his career, the History World Tour. 60 countries, 5 million people. Every stadium sold out. He had 3 shows coming up in 4 days. His team was in chaos mode: rehearsals, logistics, press obligations. Every minute of his schedule was accounted for, but that wasn't even the shocking part. The real story had started 6 months earlier, and nobody knew the truth. February 1996. Sofia Reyes was 7 years old. She lived with her mother, Carmen, in a small apartment in East Los Angeles. Her father worked 2 jobs. Her older brother was in middle school. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Then Sofia started getting headaches. At first, Carmen thought it was stress, school, maybe she needed glasses, but the headaches got worse. Then Sofia started falling, small stumbles, then bigger ones. Then one morning she collapsed in the kitchen and didn't wake up for 11 minutes. The diagnosis came 3 weeks later: medulloblastoma, a brain tumor, aggressive, fast. Moving. Sofia was 7 years old, and the doctors were already talking about survival rates. The treatment started immediately. Surgery, then radiation, then chemotherapy, round after round. By March, Sofia's hair was gone. All of it. She was too weak to go to school, too sick to play outside. Her world had shrunk to a hospital bed, a small room, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. Her mother never left her side. But Carmen had to work. Bills didn't stop because her daughter was sick. The hospital wasn't free. The medication wasn't free. Nothing was free. So there were hours-long, terrible hours. When Sofia was alone, she had a small stuffed bear. She named it after nobody. She just called it Bear. Some days a nurse would bring her a coloring book. Some days the television in the corner would flicker on for an hour. But mostly it was silence. The kind of silence that presses down on you, the kind a 7-year-old should never have to know. That was her world: Bear, the window, the parking lot. Here is the thing most people don't understand about childhood cancer wards. The kids there are some of the bravest human beings alive. They go through things that would break most adults, and they do it quietly. Without understanding why, without deserving any of it. Sofia was one of those kids. The nurses adored her. She never complained. She never threw fits. She just endured, day after day. There was a nurse named Rosa who always brought her an extra pudding cup on Tuesdays. Not because it was policy, just because she couldn't stand seeing that small face so still, so empty. Rosa said later that Sofia was the quietest child she had ever treated, and the one she thought about most, long after her shift ended. But some nights, after her mother had gone home and the ward had gone quiet, Sofia would slip out of her room. She wasn't supposed to, but the hallways were empty, and her room felt like a box. She would sit against the wall in the corridor, knees pulled to her chest, and cry, silently, so nobody would hear. Nobody ever noticed. Until one night they did, the 14th of August, 1996. Michael Jackson had been visiting children's hospitals for years. Quietly, without announcement, his team would call ahead, but only to hospital administration. No press, no cameras. Strict instructions. He would walk through the wards, sit with kids, talk to them, bring gifts, and then leave. No photographs released, no press statements. His team hated it. His publicist had begged him for years to let them document at least some of it. Think of the headlines. Think of the image rehabilitation. Think of what this could do for you. Michael's answer was always the same. One word number, because that wasn't why he did it. On the 14th of August, he arrived at Children's Hospital Los Angeles at 9 p.m. after visiting hours. Administration had let him in through a side entrance. 2 staff members walked with him. That was it. He spent an hour in the oncology ward, room by room, kid by kid. There was a boy in room 7 who wanted to talk about baseball. Michael sat with him for 12 minutes. There was a girl in room 11 who was asleep, so Michael just stood in the doorway for a moment, quietly, and then moved on. There was a teenager in room 14 who pretended not to care, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. Michael sat in the chair beside his bed anyway, didn't say much, just sat. The teenager uncrossed his arms after about 4 minutes. Nobody on Michael's team timed it. One of the staff members just remembered it later because it struck her as remarkable. The way presence alone, just being there, just refusing to leave, could reach someone that words couldn't. He was heading toward the exit when he saw her. Sophia was sitting on the floor against the wall, 12 feet from her room, bald head tilted down, shoulders shaking, a small stuffed bear pressed against her chest. She didn't hear him coming. She didn't look up. And Michael Jackson stopped walking. The staff members behind him stopped too. They looked at each other. They knew the protocol. They were already 8 minutes behind schedule. He had a 6 a.m. rehearsal. The car was waiting, but Michael wasn't moving. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at this tiny girl on the cold linoleum floor. And then, he sat down, not on a chair, not on a bench, on the floor. Right next to her, cross-legged, like a kid. Sophia looked up and froze. She recognized him immediately. Every kid did. Michael didn't make a big moment of it. He didn't perform. He just sat there beside her quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then he leaned in close, and he whispered something. The 2 staff members standing 10 feet away couldn't hear what he said. Nobody could, just Sophia. And when he pulled back, something had changed in her face. The tears were still there, but something else was there too. Something that hadn't been there a minute ago. She looked at him for a long moment, then she held out bear. She offered it to him. Michael shook his head gently. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, placed it carefully in her hand, closed her fingers around it. Then he stood up. The staff members moved. He walked to the exit. He never looked back. The next morning, Carmen arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m. Sophia was sitting up in bed, bear on one side, and in her other hand, a small object she wouldn't put down. A single white glove, tiny child-sized, like it had been made specifically for a small hand. Carmen asked where it came from. Sophia just smiled. For the first time in 4 months, she smiled. She wouldn't tell anyone what he had whispered, not her mother, not the nurses, not the doctors who asked. She just held the glove and smiled. But wait. Here is where it gets even more incredible. 3 days later, hospital administration received a call from a lawyer's office. Anonymous donor. Specific request. The donor wanted to cover the full medical costs for every child currently admitted to the oncology ward. 41 children. The total bill was $1.3 million. The check cleared within 48 hours. Hospital administrators were speechless. They tried to trace the donor. The lawyers wouldn't say. Completely anonymous, completely legal, completely untraceable. Someone who cares, the lawyer told the administrator. That is all I am authorized to say. The medical director told her staff that morning. Some of them cried. Some of them just stood there. 41 families would not receive a bill that month, or the next month, or ever for treatments already received. 41 children, including Sophia Reyes, were suddenly free of a financial weight their families had been drowning under. Years passed. Sophia's tumor responded to treatment. By the end of 1996, scans showed significant reduction. By 1997, it was in remission. She grew back her hair. She went back to school. She grew up. She kept the glove. She never talked about that night publicly. Not in middle school, not in high school, not when she got into nursing school, not when she became a pediatric oncology nurse, working in the same hospital where she had once sat on a cold floor and cried. She kept it inside. For 13 years. The 25th of June, 2009. Sophia was 20 years old. She was in her second year of nursing school when the news broke. Michael Jackson was dead. She was in the campus library when she saw it on her phone. She closed her eyes. Saturday very still for a long time. That night she went home, opened a box she kept on the top shelf of her closet. Inside was a small white glove, a little worn now, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. She held it, and she finally cried the way she had needed to cry for 13 years. 2 weeks later, Sophia wrote a letter. She didn't post it online. She didn't send it to a newspaper. She sent it to the Michael Jackson estate, handwritten 4 pages. She wrote about that night in the hallway, about the glove, about what he had whispered, and for the first time, she told someone what those words were. She wrote them down in the letter. The estate never released the full letter publicly. They honored her privacy completely. But one of the attorneys who read it described it later in a documentary. He said, "It wasn't anything poetic. It wasn't a grand statement. It was something a child would say to another child who was scared." He told her she was the bravest person he had ever seen, and that brave people are never really alone, even when it feels that way. That was it. 8 words, more or less. From the most famous man in the world, to a 7-year-old girl on a hospital floor, and it had kept her going for 13 years. In 2011, Sophia went public, not for fame, not for attention, because a journalist working on a piece about Michael Jackson's undocumented hospital visits tracked her down. The journalist had found records, not of the visits themselves, but of the anonymous donations that followed them. A pattern, stretching back to 1984. Hospital after hospital, city after city, country after country. The journalist had documented 39 separate anonymous donations to children's hospitals, totaling over $28 million across 25 years. All untraceable. All following the same pattern. A visit, then days later, a check. When the journalist found Sophia and told her what the investigation had uncovered, she sat quietly for a long moment. Then she agreed to tell her story. The piece ran in a major publication, Sophia's account, the pattern of donations, the scale of it. The response was immediate. Within a week, 47 other people had come forward, former patients, nurses who had witnessed the visits, hospital administrators who had received the calls from anonymous lawyers, former patients from Germany, from Brazil, from Japan, from Australia, all with the same story, a quiet visit, a moment of connection, no cameras, no fanfare. And then, days later, a financial burden lifted. Today, Sophia Reyes is a pediatric oncology nurse at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. She has worked there for 9 years. On the wall of her locker, there is a photograph. Not of Michael Jackson performing, not of him on a stage, just a hallway, empty, quiet, lit by fluorescent lights. She took it herself. Years after that night, the exact spot where she had sat and cried. The exact spot where he had sat down beside her. Underneath the photograph, she wrote 4 words on a piece of tape. "He saw me here." And in her locker, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, is a small white glove. She never put it on. She never displayed it. She just kept it close. Because some things aren't for the world to see. Some things are just for you. That is the part Michael Jackson understood better than almost anyone. The cameras were never the point. The kid on the floor was the point. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to remember that the most important things are almost always the ones nobody sees. Subscribe for more stories that the headlines never told. And turn on notifications, because the next one might be the one that changes how you see everything.